What's up guys, we're doing another video of best motorcycles under $2,500 and this time we're doing sport bikes. So we're gonna be asking Josh some of his favorite sport bike motorcycles. He's gonna give us some of the best ones he likes. So let's go ahead and get started with the first one.
Yeah, so 2,500 bucks, not obviously a lot to find for under $2,500 in the sport bike category. So using this term somewhat loosely, there are gonna be some bikes on the list that will very clearly fit the technical definition of a sport bike, but some maybe not technically a sport bike, but very much a sporty bike, a bike that you're going to be able to take on the track if you so desire, that you're going to have a lot of fun with.
Great, headed off with the first one, but I guess before you do that,
yes,
we're also going to be adding in one that we don't really recommend you buy, and we're going to mix it in the mix-up, so just stay on the lookout for that.
Stick around for that one. You are going to want to avoid it at all cost. So number one, I'm going to start with the 03-04 Honda CBR 600 RR. This is in contrast to the CBR 600 F4i. I actually much prefer the RR version. Honestly, it looks a lot better, handles a lot better, it has a little bit more power, and in a lot of regards, it is a much more modern bike over the F4i or over the F4 model that preceded that one as well. So great, reliable bike, parts are super cheap. We actually have a ton of parts for sale at our store here for the 03-04 CBR 600. So just great all-around sport bike. 03-04 is probably the year to look for if you are in the $2,500 mark or less.
Right, is there anything that really stands out as a con for that motorcycle?
There's not a lot to dislike about it.
Okay.
I mean, even though it's 20-some years old now, it doesn't look 20-some years old. Maybe about 10 years old. It's really held up well. It's a Honda. It's reliable. It's fuel injected. It does not have inverted forks. It actually has standard forks. So different maintenance things like rebuilding forks or changing the oil and replacing filters and those sorts of things. Still going to be a very simple bike to work on overall. Yeah.
Very nice, very nice. On a scale of 1 to 10, what would you rate this power when it comes to other sport bikes of the era?
So of this era in this class, you're gonna be a solid 8. It's obviously not a leader bike. It's not an R1, not a ZX10. It's nothing like that. But as far as a super sport 600 class bike is concerned, your skill on the track against other people with the same class of bike is going to matter much more than the actual power of the motorcycle itself.
Right, and I was going to ask you about the aesthetics of it, but if you look at this picture that we have here, you don't really have to ask. It's a great looking bike.
Yeah.
If you're looking for a sport motorcycle, I mean, that's what you're going to get.
That's what you're going to want.
That's what you want.
And a huge step up from the F4i. I mean, they both start with CBR 600, so when you pull up your search results on Facebook Marketplace or eBay or wherever, you're going to get both models, and you'll clearly see the RR version, much better looking bike, much more modern.
Great, great. Let's go ahead and move on to the second motorcycle here.
Yes. All right, so number 2 on the list, we have the 03-08 Suzuki SV650. This is a classic sport bike. Again, we're using the term sport bike a little bit loosely, maybe not technically defined as a sport bike, but for most guys that are maybe newer to riding or familiar or maybe that are not super into sport bike culture, it's still an awesome, very reliable bike, very well balanced motorcycle. This is one that you're going to be able to buy for relatively inexpensive. You're going to be able to maintain it inexpensively, and it still performs really well on the track. It'll keep up with many of the other bikes in its class, and it'll do so on a budget as well.
Great. So you were saying that it's on the cusp of being a sport bike, like kind of having to use the term loosely.
Yep.
But for those wanting to get into sport motorcycles, which assumedly you're looking at sport bikes under $2,500,
assuming.
would this be a good starting point if it's just on the cusp, so it's not going to be crazy amounts of power, but just a good beginner
Right,
bike.
That's what's great about the SV650, especially the second generation, which is much more reliable than the first generation SV650. That's why I specifically said 03-08. But it's a V-twin as opposed to a sport bike is going to technically, in most cases, going to be an inline 4, which will have let's just call it a much more abrupt power delivery. With the V-twin of the SV650, the power delivery is much more linear, much easier to control. It's going to be a great option for both the street or the track.
Great. Yeah. And now when I think of sport bikes, like I think of fairings wrapped around, kind of like short, stout, kind of looks a little bit bulky, but this one looks a little bit more like naked and experienced.
Yeah, so that's a great point, because they make both a naked model of the SV650 and a fairing model. So the naked version is just the SV650. The SV650S is the model with the fairings. I prefer the naked model. I think it has just like a classic sporty look to it. I think the fairings are a little bit dated on it. So if it were me, if it were my money, I'd try to find one of the non-S model SV650s.
Okay, so if you like that kind of style where it's got a little bit less fairings, our fifth bike that we're choosing is another naked style bike. So if you like that style, be sure to stay up until that one, especially because it's a good one.
It's a great bike. It's a great bike.
I looked ahead.
Absolutely.
I looked ahead.
Yeah. Okay. You cheated. All right.
I did.
All right,
I did. Now, when it comes to like comfortability on this, kind of compared to other bikes, 1 to 10 maybe, or however.
So it's gonna be a solid 7, 8. It is gonna be much more comfortable than a traditional sport bike, like a CBR 600, like a Gixxer 600, like a ZX6. It's gonna have a little bit more of a relaxed seating position. So in terms of streetability, gonna be a little bit more comfortable. You'll have a one-up in that regard.
Great. Anything else you feel like you need to add to this bike?
Man, parts are super cheap. You know, I love these bikes because everything seems like it's 15 or 20 bucks, you know. So if you buy one as a project bike, easy to work on, parts are cheap. That's kind of the perfect match there.
Great, which he mentioned in the last bike that we sell used parts for tons of motorcycles. So if you need a used part for your motorcycle, or you're looking at motorcycles that are under 2,500 bucks that might need a few things here and there, go ahead and go down in the description and you can find a link to our full inventory of parts for sport bikes, cruisers, dirt bikes, everything. Pretty much anything.
Yeah, so, absolutely.
But with that being said, let's go ahead and move on to the third
number
motorcycle
3
here.
All right, number 3. This is a personal favorite of mine, 99 to 01 Yamaha R1. This was actually the very first leader bike that I personally owned, and fell in love with this bike so many years ago. And it's a perfect combination of incredible power and incredible agility because it's so light. A lot of the leader bikes of this era, particularly a GSX-R 1000, dimensionally it's much larger, has a longer wheelbase, weighs quite a bit more, but the R1 is going to have similar power, but much lighter. It's going to feel a bit more like a 600 class bike in terms of the bikes of its era. So of course it's 20 some years old now. Motorcycle technology has come a long way, but for that time period, for that era, man, it's going to be hard to beat for the money and for that particular class of bike.
Very good. Very good. And we actually did a video on this where we were tearing one apart. Very sad for that bike.
Very sad.
We got a lot of great feedback in the comments of people who rode this. So, I mean, if you ride this bike, comment down below. But,
let us know.
I mean, look at the aesthetics of it. It is, when it comes to sport bikes, like that's the classic, like you see it on the road, there's no mistaking it.
Classic sport bike look, the headlights, I feel, even today when I see an R1 coming at me, like I just know it's an R1 because of the headlights. They look so good, and it holds up really well. You know, 20 some years later, still a very modern looking bike, and performs well and will hold its own on the track.
Great, great. I also know that for the R1, the power, like, it's kind of unmatched for its class. Is that, am I understanding that correctly?
For the time, considering how light it was compared to its competition, there was not a whole lot that could reckon with it 20 years ago, 25 years ago at this point.
Right. Yeah. And I'll put the dry weight on the screen there. And for each of these motorcycles, I'll be putting the top speed, because of the sport bike. You want to know.
You got to know.
You want to know.
You got to know. Absolutely.
Great. Yep. So any cons that stand out with it?
Cons is that they're just getting harder to find. Pick one up while you can.
Yeah. Great.
That's it.
I think we're ready to move on to the fourth one. So what do you got for number 4 here?
Okay, so number 4, we're going to go to a 2000-2001 Honda CBR 929. This was, of course, more or less Honda's flagship sport bike model at the time. It was a huge step up in their technology and in power and in agility. And it very much was a competitor to the Yamaha R1 that we previously talked about. The R1 did make a little bit more power, but you were really hard pressed to find a better bike other than both the R1 and the 929. Now, I will have to take a minute to say, I have bought many personal CBR 929 bikes for myself that I rode, that I enjoyed for about $2,500. It is getting harder and harder to find them. You are not gonna find a mint showroom condition 929 for $2,500. However, you could probably find one that's maybe been laid down that is probably a Chinese fairing kit away from looking like a brand new bike and still gonna have that Honda reliability, that Honda power, coupled with the suspension. It is a little bit of a lighter bike for its class as well. Again, very similar to the R1 in that regard, but just an awesome bike. You're gonna be real hard pressed to find a better bike for that money. And the last thing I'll say about it is this, they are becoming much, much rarer. Obviously, every day that goes by seems like somebody breaks one and gets taken off the road. However, if you can find one that's in pretty good condition, keep it in good condition. I suspect you'll be able to ride it for 2, 3, 4, 5 years and at least make all your money back on it, if not make a little money in the end. So also, a great investment, as much as an old sport bike can be considered an investment.
Right, and since we were already comparing this to the R1, let's go back to the R1 a little bit. So this is a Honda CBR 929. Honda, like you said, very reliable.
Yep.
So I feel like that kind of takes the cake when it comes to the Yamaha R1. Is there any reason that you would choose the R1 over the CBR if you can get it for around the same amount?
If it's the same money, same condition, the only reason I'm taking the R1 is because I just love the way it looks. A little bit more.
It comes down to aesthetics.
Right, but if there was like a $300 price difference and like I was strapped for cash, I'd just get whichever one was cheaper.
Right.
And if I wasn't strapped for cash, I'd just buy both.
Great. Okay, I think you pretty much answered all my questions for the CBR.
All right.
Before we move on to the fifth one, we said we're gonna add in that just don't buy it, and that's what we're gonna talk about right now. What is it?
Man, this motorcycle is just full of regrets. Kawasaki EX500, a little bit of a bigger bro to the EX250. Not a particularly good looking bike. It's not faster, it's not enough faster than a 250 to warrant the purchase price. They're a little bit uglier for some reason, and they're hard as dickens to sell.
Hard as dickens, you've heard it here.
Yeah, you've heard it here first. Yeah, they're tough to sell. They're just not a desirable bike. More guys want the EX250. The parts are harder to find over the 500. Just not a great bike overall. The carbs are kind of a pain in the butt to work on. It's the way that they're positioned in the bike. It's just a pain in the nuts, man. It's just a bike to avoid. For about the same amount of money, you could maybe just save for 2 or 3 more weeks and just get another bike on this list. Please, for the love of God, don't get a Ninja 500. You will regret it. Not a good one.
Okay, so I'm looking at you, okay? Sport bikes look great, great power. I'm kind of the opinion, if you're riding one, you want it to look good.
It's gotta look the part.
I mean, it's gotta look like a sport bike. Look at this picture right here. That is disgusting.
She's a rough girl.
That's disgusting compared to anything else.
Straight out of 1985.
I mean, come on.
Yeah.
Okay, so just please, just don't. But I kind of want to be fair. Is there any pros to this bike? I mean,
the pro is that if you drop it in the garage and smash half the bike, it's not any uglier.
There you go.
That's a pro. That might be a good pro out there. Whistling Diesel could appreciate that.
Oh yeah.
That's something to think about. Yeah. No, price-wise, it's about $2,000, $2,500. Just save your money. Go get an SV650. Make that your first bike, not a Ninja 500. That's what I would do.
Great. Yeah. Let's go ahead and move on to the fifth and final bike then. Cool. This is the style of what is it?
Yes, so we have a Ducati Monster 900 or an M900. Absolutely love this bike. Ducati had been using this engine, put it in just about everything by this point. They worked out most of the kinks. It's a pretty darn reliable bike. A little bit harder to find than say a Monster 700, a Monster 750. So in the similar price range, similar bracket, you could probably find a 750. I'd try and hold out for a 900 if you can. You're gonna be hard pressed to find a more reliable, older Italian motorcycle like it, but it's gonna be a great track or street weapon. Reliability, looks great, makes awesome power, and again, because it's an L-twin or V-twin, very linear power delivery, so you're not going to win any drag races, but around the track and around the street, it's just going to be a phenomenally performing motorcycle.
Right, and what we had listed here was like a 2001, 2002, and it's an Italian bike, kind of Ducati's kind of known as like, it's a little bit more like luxurious from what I understand.
Yeah, well, a little bit more expensive. Anything Italian will be.
Yeah. So what is it when it comes to parts? When it comes to fixing it, it's a 22-year-old bike.
Right.
What do you need to know about fixing an Italian bike over one of these Japanese bikes?
Right. So it obviously a little bit more complicated than say a traditional Japanese sport bike. However, it's not terribly challenging at all to work on these, to change things like timing belts and oil changes. Regular maintenance is all going to be very, very simple. So not a lot to go wrong with them. And during this era, Ducati was using a lot of the same parts from many different models. So even if you can't find the part you need for that specific model, chances are there's another bike out there that uses the same part you will be able to throw right onto this model. The last great thing about it is the fact that because it is a Ducati, because it is a little bit older and more reliable, because it has classic good looks, I think this is going to be a great bike to purchase. Again, not as a technical investment, but you could probably buy it, take very good care of it, keep it, ride it 2, 3, 4, 5 years, and probably sell it for the same, if not more money than you originally purchased it for. So
that's great.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now I'm a rookie when it comes to riding bikes.
Okay.
When it comes to, I just haven't even really owned a motorcycle.
Sure.
So when I kind of look at these sport bikes, okay, the R1, the CBR 929, they look like sport bikes.
They do.
This doesn't necessarily look like, to an untrained eye, a sport bike, which to me kind of means maybe it doesn't have as much power. Speak to the power of it versus these other ones.
It's about 80 horsepower, so it's going to be outclassed by a typical inline 4 600cc motorcycle. So in that regard, it's not going to win any drag races, but it'll do well enough on the track and the street that you're going to be able to more than enjoy it. And again, going back to the fact that it's an L-twin, makes a significant amount of torque, which makes it much more friendly to ride on the street and to enjoy without having to go 9/10 all of the time. So this is something you'll be able to take on the street and ride at 6/10, and you'll still get a ton of enjoyment without redlining, banging every gear, breaking every speed limit under the moon. So it's just a very usable, enjoyable, classic motorcycle.
Great. I think that's everything.
That covers it.
I want to close it with saying, guys, thanks so much. If you made it to the end, thank you so much. And what would actually be a huge help is we're looking to add to our B-roll arsenal to make these videos just a little bit more interesting to watch, swap in some different photos of different bikes. So if you want to have a chance of your motorcycle being in one of our videos, shoot us some pictures of some photos. We've got our Gmail in the bio of our channel, so send us some pictures, send us some videos that we might include in our videos. Just make sure you film it horizontal or take pictures of it horizontal. Huge help. But with that being said, can
I use my pictures from my R1 for this video?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna have to send some in.
There you go. Well,
before we get to post.
We'll probably just.
But they won't hear about that, or maybe they will hear about that. Maybe. I don't know what you're leaving in.
Who knows?
Okay, we'll see.
Just, you can probably just hand it to me though. You don't need.
I'll just hand them over. Yeah. Thanks for watching, guys.
Subscribe, like the video, comment below what you ride and what you would choose from these 5 bikes. And
what would you take?
Maybe we missed one. I don't know. Put it down there.
Let us know.
Yeah. Okay.
Let us know.
Peace.
All right.